In the TPS Teachers Network, there is a group called Rural Education, and this group originated from a grant called the Rural Experience in America funded by the LOC. They just finished one of their 3-year grant cycle, and there are professional development opportunities. So if you're interested, please look up Regina Holland in the network for information on that. And today, I want to highlight 2 discussion posts from this network that tie into history, geography, and even crossover into environmental science and economics as well. Now, the first post that I'll highlight is about the Dust Bowl. So first, I do want to point out that the LOC has amazing resources online in their classroom materials that include primary source sets, a teacher's guide, and an ebook on Apple iBooks. Often when the Dust Bowl is taught, teachers show primary source photographs like this one from the Dust Bowl and talk about the wind blowing, how much topsoil was lost, that dirt blew from the prairie not just across the continent, but even 300 miles out into the Atlantic Ocean. April 14th, 1935, the dust storm that day carried twice as much dirt as was dug out of the Panama Canal. 300,000 tons of topsoil was in the air that day. We teach about 400,000 families who migrated to California alone. We teach about how many people lost their farms and homes. And eventually we get to the migrant mother images and talk about the results of the Dust Bowl. Other than talking about poor farming techniques, sometimes it isn't a focus in the classroom on what caused the Dust Bowl and if it could happen again today. So this post within the network helps teachers go a little deeper into the Dust Bowl. It originated from a national science poster contest. Each year this contest has a theme, and this year it was Healthy Soil, Healthy Life, and it focused on 4 soil conservation methods: crop rotation, cover crops, no-till farming, and buffer zones. Now, you might be asking yourself what these things have to do with the social studies. The Dust Bowl, one of the greatest environmental disasters of all time, in my opinion, and usually in a U.S. history book, there's a paragraph about how there was a drought, a lot of land was cleared for farming, and then the wind came and it went to blowing dirt. But these 4 soil conservation methods are all things that would have helped mitigate the Dust Bowl and are practices used today to prevent another such disaster. And guess what? There are plenty of primary sources to help students understand their impact on the past and the future. So here is the post in the Teachers Network. This post goes deeper into the Dust Bowl. You can see the 4 soil conservation methods with links to their primary sources. Let's take a look at some of them. For crop rotation, there are primary sources about Thomas Jefferson and George Washington talking about their crop rotation practices. Here are Thomas Jefferson's notes on crop rotation. You can see that Thomas Jefferson drew out plots of his field showing what would be planted and rotated: potatoes, wheat, turnips, clover, rye, and Jefferson made notes about growing clover, which aside from crop rotation is important as a cover crop to restore nutrients to the soil and increase yields. And boom, here in one primary source document, we've hit upon 2 of the 4 soil conservation methods that weren't always in practice related to the Dust Bowl. Jefferson also writes about stubble from various crops. And what does stubble do? It provides ground cover to keep the topsoil from blowing away. Here in this primary source, George Washington recorded which fields would be planted with which crops in different years, taking crop rotation into consideration to ensure the best yields. We can see corn, potatoes, wheat, clover again, and so on. And I love this. Washington calculated his probable yield, figured out how many acres in each crop, how many bushels, and what he thought each crop would be worth. And then here, also in the post, are photographs illustrating strip cropping and reference information from the Natural Resources Conservation Service on crop rotation, so that teachers can explain to students what these techniques are, what they look like, and what they mean. The post does the same thing with cover crops. It provides basic background information along with primary sources. And again for the third technique, no-till fields and buffer zones. I love this with the WPA poster on trees. It brings in the WPA and poster art, and that's always so much fun to teach. Trees prevent wind erosion, save moisture, protect crops, contribute to human comfort and happiness. Next, the post shares information from other network members who had already shared information in the network. So here we can see an album created by a network member with great photographs, recorded music, and lyrics. And this is an audio file of Mrs. Flora Robertson talking about the Dust Bowl. Finally, the discussion post brings soil conservation and the Dust Bowl back full circle by providing K-8 science resources on soil and soil conservation, ready for you to use in the classroom. So what? What can you and your students get out of this network discussion post? After learning more about soil conservation, students better understand how the Dust Bowl happened in a greater sense than just quote-unquote poor farming techniques. And they learn what farmers and ranchers do today to ensure that it doesn't happen again. The second post from the rural education group that I want to highlight is called Like Food, and it was inspired by these signs that you see driving across Kansas. Does anybody know what percentage of our country is involved in feeding the U.S. population? It is 2%. The Like Food discussion has PDF resources with discussion questions, primary source images, and guiding questions for the primary source images. I love this post because it's dripping with geography, resources, how people grow and consume food, how it varies by location and time, and it asks students to analyze where their food originates. Here are some of the discussion questions. And the nice thing about this post is that they are ready to grab and go and use in your classroom tomorrow. And for each of these discussion questions, there are accompanying primary resources and guiding questions for you to use in your classroom. This is from the discussion question, who do you think farmers and ranchers are? The post has primary sources from yesterday, like this one, which provides plenty of analysis and close reading. Is it one family? Is it one generation? I can see weeds growing on the roof. What else do you see here? What do you think they produced and for whom? And it also has primary sources from today. Big difference in the answers to those same questions on the last primary resource that we looked at to this one. And if you haven't seen dairy farmers play music to bring the cows in, you really do need to check it out. And yes, you can find this resource on the Library of Congress site. I used to tell students and teachers that the LOC had everything on its site, including the kitchen sink, and I'd show them a picture of a kitchen sink. But now I say they have everything, including serenading cows with trombones. And for all of these primary sources, the post has guiding questions to go with the images to make it grab and go for you to use in your classroom tomorrow. What do you notice? What can't you explain? What do these images say about food production, and so on? Here's another question in a primary resource. Where does your food come from? Here's a 1940 storefront. There is a lot to look at in this image. You can compare prices. Eggs were 19 cents a dozen. How much are they now? Where do you think they came from then, and where do you think they come from today? Why can you buy scratch feed and dairy feed at the grocery store? Do you go to a grocery store today and see apples and cucumbers in the window? What is the same? What is different? Here is another example with this primary source. Where does your food come from? Maybe this 1938 image will make your kids think of food trucks downtown, or maybe it will make them think of the Schwann's man bringing frozen foods to your house. Where does your food come from? Here's Gerald Ford at a farmer's market in Philadelphia in 1976. And I really like this question. How has agricultural production changed over time? And here are the primary sources to support that question. We have the same activity going on here, harvesting wheat throughout different times. And here is a screenshot from another great question. What do you think are the top 3 agricultural products in the United States? They're cattle, corn, and soybeans. This is a great geography question. It's a great economics question. Now, how many products can your students name made from these items? This post has the primary sources to help them answer that question and links to information from other sources as well. In closing, there are so many rich resources within this network, and you never know which you're going to find. The Rural Education Group is a great example, so be sure to check out this group within the network and grab and go with some great projects, discussions, and activities for your classroom using primary resources.